Good evening, and tonight's dark little tour begins in a gleaming 1950s American suburban bathroom, where chrome catches the morning light, towels wait in perfect thirds, pastel jars crowd the vanity, rosewater and Aquanet drift over a faint chemical note, and most of those lovely products reach the shelf without proving much of anything first. I am glad you are here again, Riley in Calgary and Nora in Dorset, because you both commented on the last video and stayed until the end. Tell me where you are and what time it is for you, just like Riley and Nora did. And if you would like and subscribe, you can drift off with me a little more easily every episode. Have you ever looked at a beautiful bottle and felt how much trust can hide inside a tidy label? So the cabinet door eases open. The room is cool at the ankles, and the air tastes of metal polish, face powder, rose water, Aquanet, and a thin, bright thread of something chemical underneath. Harold is already at the sink, calmly lathering his jaw with your pale pink hormone face cream again. He does this with the soft, focused confidence of a man who has never once read a label. The jar sits beside his shaving brush, and the matching shaving cream jar sits beside your cold cream. The two jars are the same size. They are the same shade of polite pink. They were made to look harmonious on the shelf, which is lovely for the eye and less useful for the chin. He has been doing this for several months now. He has not noticed any changes. You have not told him. This is part of the mood in this room. Beauty in the 1950s liked to look calm, exact, and expertly arranged. It did not always like to explain itself. The bathroom itself is a little shrine to post-war comfort. It gleams with the sort of confidence that comes from new tile, good plumbing, and a mortgage brochure. A few years earlier, many family bathrooms were plain working rooms. They had a tub, a sink, a medicine cabinet, and not much interest in being admired. Then came the suburban boom, and the bathroom learned to pose. It gained color, polish, and a sense that guests might judge your moral fiber by the fold of a hand towel. Maple Street, like many streets after the war, believes in brightness. It believes in fresh paint, clipped lawns, and fixtures with enough chrome to catch a small sunrise. The bathroom is not only a place to wash, it is a place to display order. It says that the house runs well, and that the woman of the house runs even better. The towels are color-matched with the soap dish. The soap dish nods politely to the toothbrush cup. Even the wastebasket seems to have joined a committee. Nothing in here is accidental. The cotton balls sit in a clear jar like obedient little clouds. The bath salts wear a mint green label that promises Paris, though they were poured in New Jersey. The vanity shelf is the true center of the room. It is crowded in the fond, bustling way of a small-town train station. Little containers wait shoulder to shoulder, each one certain it matters. There is cold cream in a thick glass pot. There is vanishing cream in a pearl-tinted jar. There is skin freshener, hand lotion, talc, hair tonic, bath oil, deodorant, and at least 3 things calling themselves scientific. A woman could stand here and feel fully supplied for modern life. She could also feel slightly outnumbered by her own products. This was rather the point. After the Second World War, American beauty companies expanded with almost joyful speed. Factories that had learned scale and efficiency turned those talents toward lipstick, lotion, hairspray, and dreams. New homes rose across the edges of cities. New bathrooms appeared inside those homes. New shelves needed filling, and the beauty industry was happy to help with the filling. It did not merely sell soap. It sold calm, freshness, youth, romance, polish, and the promise that a better cream might smooth the whole week. Each bottle spoke in the cheerful voice of post-war progress. Science would handle your pores. Chemistry would help your curls. A clever new formula would surely manage the rest. The packaging told this story before anyone opened a lid. Pastel shades did much of the work. Powder blue meant clean. Shell pink meant tender. Pale yellow meant sunny good scents. Then came the chrome lids. They flashed like tiny car bumpers. They suggested speed, progress, and a future in which every household problem would soon wear a polished top. The labels used smooth script and kind little borders. Some added stars, some ribbons, and many added a doctor. Not a real doctor exactly, but an agreeable doctor shape. This is where Dr. Beaumont enters, or at least his mustache does. His serene, illustrated face appears on roughly half the vanity shelf, looking as if he has just approved the nation. No one on Maple Street has ever met Dr. Beaumont. No one seems troubled by this. The mustache is reassuring, and that appears to cover a great deal. He gazes from cartons and circulars with mild authority. He recommends creams, tonics, rinses, and several things that sound as though they were mixed near a microscope. The 1950s loved the language of beauty science. Products were invigorating, vitalizing, active, enriched, penetrating, balanced, and advanced. Very few were content to be merely soap. Words like hormone, vitamin, protein, and lanolin floated across labels like confetti at a careful parade. Even when buyers did not know the exact meaning, they knew the tone. The tone was modern. The tone was expert. The tone suggested that your face was a small but worthy laboratory. Magazine ads pushed this feeling with determined charm. A smiling woman in pearls would hold a jar beside a chart, while a man in a white coat nodded from the side. Some ads showed beakers. Some showed skin cells drawn like tiny flowers. Some simply placed the product beside a microscope and trusted the implication to finish the sentence. The line between medicine and makeup could feel pleasantly blurry. If it sounded scientific enough, it also sounded caring. If it sounded caring, it sounded safe. That safety, in legal terms, was more of a mood than a system. The law had spoken about cosmetics in 1938, but it had done so with a light and rather distant touch. The Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act did expand federal power over many products. It cared a great deal about foods and drugs. Cosmetics got attention too, though not nearly enough to spoil the fun. A cosmetic usually did not need approval before reaching the market. A company did not march each new cream to Washington for a blessing. It mostly placed the cream on a shelf and wished itself luck. If the product was filthy, badly tainted, or falsely labeled in an obvious way, officials could step in later. Later is a calm word. It can also be a very slow word. The government could object after trouble appeared. It could write letters and begin cases. It could do the administrative version of clearing its throat in a stern hallway. In 1955, the FDA's authority over cosmetics had roughly the regulatory muscle of a strongly worded Yelp review. Companies could more or less ignore it, and often did so with a breezy smile. There were narrower rules around some color additives, especially certain coal tar colors, but outside those lanes, the road grew wide very quickly. Most companies were not required to prove safety before a jar met your bathroom shelf. They were not required to hand over every neat little ingredient to the woman buying it either. Ingredient lists, as modern shoppers know them, were not the routine furniture of a label. Trade secrets stayed secret. Perfume stayed perfume. The rest could remain politely vague. A cream might promise refinement, softness, and new radiance. It might not feel pressed to say exactly how those things were meant to happen. That was considered perfectly ordinary. So the beauty industry worked on what historians politely call the honor system. This is a diplomatic way of saying it operated on almost nothing at all, and everyone seemed strangely content. Your bathroom vanity in 1955 was essentially an unboxing haul channel. Instead of discount electronics, the mystery item inside was occasionally mild organ damage. The bows and ribbons remained first-rate. The odd thing is how normal this all felt. Nothing about the shelf looked reckless. It looked clean, pretty, and supervised by 3 magazines and 1 mustache. That is the power of design. A soft blue box can lower the pulse. A chrome lid can make uncertainty feel as organized as table settings. The suburban bathroom helped this feeling along. It was scrubbed, bright, and full of good intentions. It smelled like effort and rose water. Women were encouraged to make these rooms little theaters of order. A tidy cabinet meant discipline. Matching jars meant taste. A full shelf meant you were keeping up with the age. And the age was always moving. New was the sweetest word in the room. New rinse, new cream, new scientific powder, new spray that promised to solve yesterday by Tuesday. Wartime research and wartime production had changed ordinary life in many ways. Materials, methods, containers, and mass advertising all marched neatly into peacetime bathrooms. Aerosol packaging is one of those small, quiet examples. The spray can had wartime roots, and now it stood on the vanity like a silver little rocket of domestic ambition. Hairspray felt space age before space age had fully arrived. A woman could set her hair in place with a hiss and a cloud, then go make tuna casserole in peace. The sound itself became part of the decade. That soft, sharp spray, followed by a stillness, was like punctuation for the mirror. The room learned to expect it. Even the jars had their small rituals. A cardboard box came off first, then tissue, then a lid with a firm little twist, then a foil seal, thin as a promise. Inside waited creams of every shade of optimism: white for purity, peach for youth, green for freshness, pink for womanly mystery, which apparently could also be sold wholesale. Some were thick and cool and sat heavily on the fingertip. Some were whipped light and sank at once. Some had a waxy drag that suggested both luxury and practical concern. Night cream moved slowly over the face in upward strokes. Cold cream softened makeup and gathered at the corners with a satin shine. Talc rose in a small cloud and settled on the sink. There was pleasure in all this routine. One should not miss that. The motions were real and the comfort was real, even when the claims were mostly decorative. A woman at her vanity could feel cared for by the shelf. Each bottle held a task. Each task held a little control over the day. Dry elbows had a jar. Tired skin had a jar. Shine had a powder. Odor had a spray. The human body was gently divided into solvable departments. This matched the spirit of the time. Post-war America adored useful systems. It liked detergents, synthetic fabrics, kitchen gadgets, frozen pies, and charts explaining why all this progress was wholesome. Beauty products joined that parade without the slightest shyness. They did not say, "Perhaps this may help." They said, "Here is the modern answer, and it comes in coral." Betty from next door is especially vulnerable to coral answers. She appears without warning, holding a magazine and a shopping bag, with the confidence of a woman bringing civilization. She never knocks quite softly enough. The bathroom door is usually ajar by the time she arrives, because Betty believes fresh opinions should circulate freely through the neighborhood. On this sort of morning, she would lean in wearing house shoes and bright lipstick. She would say she has found the most marvelous new treatment in Ladies' Home Journal. Her enthusiasm is always several inches ahead of her knowledge. If the ad says laboratory tested, Betty hears destiny. If the label says contains hormones, Betty hears luxury. She does not read the ingredient list with any care. This is partly because the print is small. It is also because Betty distrusts any text less glamorous than the slogan. She trusts diagrams, endorsements, arrows, and men in illustrated ties. Above all, she trusts any product that suggests Hollywood discovered it first, and suburbia may now apply by teaspoon. When Betty places a new bottle on the vanity, it joins the others as if born there. The shelf is friendly to newcomers. It has the manners of a department store. One jar says it supports younger-looking skin. Another restores natural bloom. A third refines the very idea of womanhood, though it never explains how. Plenty of products did more than clean or scent the body. They hinted at medical depth without stepping too boldly into medical responsibility. This was a fine art. If a cream claimed to cure a disease, trouble might begin. If it merely improved tone, balance, freshness, or femininity, it could stroll along much more easily. So labels became poets of careful vagueness. They did not fix much directly. They aided, helped, supported, refreshed, corrected appearance, and encouraged nature in a general direction. Sometimes they became wonderfully specific in peculiar ways. Hormone creams, for instance, were marketed with impressive calm. They sat on middle-class shelves like they belonged next to talc. Placenta extracts appeared too, wearing an air of deep nourishment. The modern buyer may blink at this. The 1950s buyer often nodded and thought, well, that sounds scientifically rich. This was the age when chemistry itself had glamour. A strange ingredient could sound more elegant than a familiar one. Mystery often dressed as progress. The Avon lady understood this better than anyone, though she did not always mean to. She arrived every Tuesday at the single worst possible moment, smiling through the screen door with a fresh catalog. She would come when hair was half pinned. She would come when the bath was running. She would come naturally when Harold was shaving with the wrong pink jar. Her briefcase snapped open like a traveling theater. Inside were lipsticks, powders, creams, bath oils, and little sample vials that smelled wonderful and contained multitudes. She never once read the small print. She had no need to. The pages glowed with paintings of capable women and bottles that looked as if they already knew your best side. The Avon lady sold possibility by appointment. For a few minutes, the bathroom became a showroom, and the vanity shelf bristled with even more future than before. It is worth pausing over how much of this was about display. The suburban bathroom was private, yes, but it was also gently public. Friends saw it, neighbors compared it, guests noticed. A medicine cabinet packed with smart, pretty products hinted at prosperity. It suggested that one had discretionary income, tasteful habits, and sufficient command of one's pores. The cabinet door itself became a kind of stage curtain. Open it, and there stood your cast of jars. Each one waited to prove you were modern in exactly the right way. This made coordinated packaging a practical social tool. Matching colors looked orderly, uniform jar sizes looked refined. Clear labeling came second, if it came at all, which is how Harold can keep mistaking his shaving cream for your hormone face cream. The company wanted the shelf to look elegant, and Harold's cheeks have been living with the result. He is overworked in the ordinary suburban husband way. He rushes through mornings with one eye on the clock and one hand in the wrong jar. The mustache foam situation remains unresolved. You might think such confusion would invite complaint. Instead, it invites a shrug. If anything, it flatters the product because it is creamy, pleasant, and very nicely pink. This is another little truth about the time. Texture and scent often spoke louder than disclosure. If a lotion felt smooth and smelled expensive, trust followed close behind. Rosewater helped. Lavender helped. Gardenia, lily, powdery violet, and clean citrus all helped. Beneath them sat the sharper notes of alcohol, solvent, propellant, and whatever else modernity required. That faint chemical edge in the room is not quite hidden. It sits under the floral sweetness like a second opinion. Most people do not linger on it. They do not linger because the whole culture is leaning forward. Progress has a bright face in the 1950s. It has fresh paint, labor-saving devices, and a persuasive opinion about creams. Magazine pages, radio ads, shop displays, and door-to-door sales all sing together. They tell women that science has entered the boudoir and brought very helpful friends. The bathroom shelf becomes a small domestic laboratory without much laboratory supervision. You apply, spray, dab, smooth, pat, and trust that someone else has handled the difficult parts. Sometimes someone else had handled them with care. Many products were ordinary and useful. Plenty were just soap, oil, wax, perfume, and coloring dressed for a formal introduction. But the system left room for a great deal of improvisation. It gave companies wide space for claims, formulas, and silence. Silence, too, can come in a pastel box. No great alarm sounded over this. That is what makes the scene so oddly gentle and strange. The shelf looked responsible enough to tuck in children. Dr. Beaumont smiled from a carton. Betty admired a headline. The Avon lady offered a sample. Harold shaved serenely with a hormonal glow he had not requested. And you, or rather the woman at the center of this polished little room, kept arranging the jars label forward. She dusted the chrome, folded the towels, and believed what the room asked her to believe. That belief was not foolish. It was social, stylish, and constantly reinforced. If every ad, clerk, magazine, neighbor, and mustached drawing says a thing is safe, the shelf begins to feel like evidence. So chapter 1 of this bathroom cabinet is not really about one villainous bottle. It is about confidence, packaging, and a system so light on rules it practically floated. Before anyone studies a single ingredient too closely, the room itself has already done its work. It has made beauty look orderly. It has made chemistry look tender. The chrome still catches the light. The towels still hold their perfect thirds. The jars still wait in their pastel ranks, smelling of roses, powder, and that quiet chemical thread below. Harold rinses his face, sets down the pink jar without a thought. And under Dr. Beaumont's steady mustache, the first lid is already turning open. The bathroom is already awake before the rest of the house feels ready to admit it. Chrome taps catch the thin morning light. Towels wait in perfect thirds. The vanity shelf crowds forward with pastel jars, spray cans, and bottles that smell of rose water, Aquanet, and something faintly sharp beneath both. Your face cream sits in the center like a small queen. Its jar is thick glass. Its lid is pale pink. A paper label curls at one edge, and a serene man with a neat dark mustache assures you this cream has been approved by Dr. Beaumont. No one has ever met Dr. Beaumont. He appears anyway. He smiles from pulled cream cartons, hand lotion boxes, and powders for sensitive skin. His mustache does most of the work. You twist the lid free with a soft, tacky sound. There is always that first little breath from the jar. It smells faintly floral and faintly medicinal. It smells like powder room sweetness trying very hard to sit on top of a chemistry set. A thin foil disc clings to the mouth of the jar. You lift it with a fingernail. Cream gathers under the edge in a smooth, pale ridge. It has the firm look of frosting left near a cool window. Mid-century face cream asked for ceremony. A woman dabbed it along her cheeks with 2 fingers. She smoothed it upward over the jaw. She was told the skin would learn good habits, rather like a child at the dinner table. The label promises softness and bloom. It promises fresh young tissue. It promises clearer tone. It promises a kind of happy future for the complexion that sounds both intimate and oddly municipal. Near the promises sits a quieter line in tiny print. The tiny print is where the room becomes more interesting. There, tucked beside the ounces and the maker's address, live ingredients that sound less like petals and more like the back shelf in a school lab. That was the charm of the 1950s beauty counter. Everything looked like candy for grown women. Everything came in pretty glass. Your bathroom vanity in 1955 was basically an unboxing channel, except the surprise inside was sometimes mild organ trouble. The stamp on the lid says "Doctor Tested." That phrase sounds steady and white-coated. It sounds like bright lamps and clipboards. It might mean one careful physician examined the formula. Or it might mean someone once showed a jar to a dentist at a bridge party. Doctor approved was even softer around the edges. Companies borrowed authority the way they borrowed French names. A product could be approved by a doctor employed by the company. It could be approved by a consultant who read a summary. It could be approved by a doctor nobody could quite locate. Dr. Beaumont sits there with his mustache and his calm eyes. His picture makes the cream feel responsible. He seems like the sort of man who would tell you to get more rest. He also seems entirely made of ink. Real dermatologists did sometimes lend their names. Sometimes they tested a cream on a few volunteers. Sometimes office workers dabbed it on one forearm for a week. Sometimes a brand simply used language so misty and polite that no one could tell where the doctor ended and the advertising began. The rules were light enough to float away on perfume. The beauty trade ran on what historians politely call the honor system. That is a diplomatic way of saying it ran on very little at all, and many people found that arrangement perfectly charming. The Food and Drug Administration stood nearby with limited force. In cosmetics, its authority could feel like a strongly worded Yelp review. A company might blush. It might also keep selling the cream in the same jar, with a nicer ribbon around the lid. You read a carton and find careful little phrases. Clinically proven may mean almost nothing useful. Dermatologist tested might only mean a dermatologist existed in the same county. Scientifically blended sounds grand, though soup is also blended and has fewer claims. The bathroom cabinet stays politely shut most of the time. It does not argue. It simply holds its rose of hope in pastel glass. From the outside, everything looks freshly washed and perfectly sensible. Then Betty from next door arrives with a magazine clipping. She never knocks quite softly enough. Her bracelets click before she does. She steps in carrying Ladies' Home Journal and a bright look that means your morning is about to become educational. She has found something new for Freckles. The clipping is folded into a tidy square and warmed by her hand. She smooths it beside the soap dish as if laying out battle plans, though in truth it is mostly adjectives and a smiling girl with very even skin. Betty is breathless in the special way only beauty advertising can cause. She says this new cream is miraculous. She says it vanishes spots while you sleep. She says the ad mentions a modern active ingredient, and modern is all she really needed to hear. The tube in the picture looks pleasingly ordinary. It could hold hand lotion or toothpaste. The pharmacy carries it near cold cream and cotton pads. No one whispers over it. No one slides it from a locked drawer. That ordinary tube often held ammoniated mercury. The name sounds more serious than the packaging ever did. The packaging preferred words like clear, pure, refined, and nighttime. It preferred tiny flowers and a woman gazing toward a better Tuesday. Freckle removers love to promise with a deadline. Apply nightly. Watch spots fade. Wake brighter. The directions were often as simple as brushing your teeth, which is not a phrase that should ever wander near mercury, and yet there it calmly sat. Skin lightening creams used it too. They sat in mainstream drugstores under flattering lights. They stood shoulder to shoulder with talc, lipsticks, and packets of bobby pins. A woman could buy one between aspirin and birthday candles. The cream itself could be thick and chalky. Sometimes it looked pearly in the jar. Sometimes it smelled faintly of perfume over a metallic bite. It left a white cast at first, then softened as the skin warmed it. Many women used only a little. A fingertip touched the freckle, then another, then the bridge of the nose for good measure. Night after night, the ritual felt tidy and practical, like starching a blouse or turning the mattress. The ads spoke with a neat bedside confidence. They mentioned stubborn blemishes. They mentioned uneven tone. They did not dwell on mercury, because mercury is a terrible word for a vanity table, and a splendid word for making sales harder. Some labels gave the ingredient plainly enough. It might sit there in small print as ammoniated mercury. The word ammoniated gave it a brisk, cleaned-up sound. It seemed to have put on a collar before coming indoors. Mainstream pharmacies sold it without much fuss. A clerk might ring it up with your face powder and mints. Brown paper wrapped the box with the same modest dignity given to cough drops. The whole affair looked respectable enough to invite no further thought. And respectability mattered more than ingredients to many shoppers. The box came from a trusted counter. The ad appeared in a trusted magazine. If Dr. Beaumont nodded from the side panel, then surely the matter had been settled by men with clipboards. Betty points to a line in the clipping. It says physician endorsed in slanted script. She taps the phrase with one red nail. She has no interest at all in learning which physician or whether he existed beyond a lunch meeting. You can almost hear the bathroom shelf sigh. There are already 3 freckle products in the cabinet. One smells of cold wax. One promises Parisian radiance, though it was made in New Jersey. The Avon lady chooses this exact moment to arrive. She always comes on Tuesday. She always comes when your hands are sticky or your hair is pinned oddly. Today she enters with a catalog, a bright smile, and a briefcase that smells wonderful and contains multitudes. She lays out another cream with a satin bow on the box. The box says, New Improved Formula. The jar says, Medically Tested. She has never once read the small print, and she never will, because that would spoil the tempo of the sales pitch. Her samples crowd the sink beside Betty's clipping. Rouge cards, lipstick bullets, and sachet envelopes spread across the counter. It looks cheerful and domestic. It also looks a little like a chemist's bench decorated by someone who adores mauve. When a product said tested, the question was often how. Maybe 10 women used it for 5 days. Maybe a company doctor checked for obvious rash on the wrists. Maybe a consultant signed off after reading the sales claims and deciding none sounded especially embarrassing. Doctor approved could be obtained in cozy ways. A brand might pay a physician to endorse a line. It might ask a dermatologist to review one formula, then stretch the glow across 6 others. It might simply imply approval so gently that readers supplied the rest themselves. A white coat in an ad was almost an ingredient. The coat did not need to belong to a real specialist. It only needed to suggest clean counters and careful men. The mustache helped too, which brings us back inevitably to Dr. Beaumont. His illustrated face appears on half your shelf. He recommends face lotion, scalp tonic, hand cream, and one alarming little jar for enlarged pores. If he ever slept, ate lunch, or paid taxes, the labels do not say. His credentials remain hidden in the fog where copywriters thrive. Perhaps he was modeled on a pharmacist's brother. Perhaps he was invented between coffee and deadline. Perhaps he was as real as the Alpine chalet on the box of bath salts. The cold cream jar beside him feels heavier in the hand. Its glass is thicker and more expensive looking. It leaves a cool ring on the vanity top. Inside sits a smooth, pale mass with the faint scent of almonds and powder. Cold cream was the quiet workhorse of the bathroom. A woman massaged it over makeup at night. She wiped it away with tissues or cotton. She used it on dry elbows, wind-bothered cheeks, and sometimes anywhere else that seemed to need maternal attention. Some brands promised more than cleaning. They promised to smooth the skin itself. They promised to perfect tone. In certain formulas, lead compounds, including lead acetate, slipped into that promise with the same calm expression as everyone else in the room. Lead acetate had a talent for sounding almost elegant. Acetate seems terribly civilized. It sounds like fabric lining or a neat chemistry textbook. It does not sound like something one should smear around the mouth before bed and then call beauty sleep. Yet there it was in some creams and powders. Not everywhere, and not always in large print, but enough to make the shelf feel odd on close inspection. A smoothing agent, a complexion helper, a little fixer in the soft white machinery of looking finished. Face powder made a fine stage for such things. The compact clicked open with a tiny mirror inside. A round puff sat in its tray like a sleeping pastry. The powder itself rose in a small cloud and settled on the sink like pale dust. Women patted it over vanishing cream or cold cream residue. They dusted the nose, the chin, and the center of the forehead. They pressed the puff carefully around lipstick. They carried the compact in handbags next to folded bills and peppermint lozenges. Perfecting the complexion meant many small tricks. A smoother powder blurred shine, a whiter one changed tone. A cream with lead acetate, or one of its polite lead cousins, helped create that matte, settled finish magazines called refined. It was never sold as anything dramatic. No one said, "now with lead." That would have upset the tulips on the label. The language stayed gentle and full of words like silken, satiny, and youthfully smooth. A woman might not know the ingredient at all. She knew the jar was good quality. She knew her mother used something similar. She knew the salesgirl said it melted into the skin and made powder lie better, which sounded practical and almost architectural. Beauty in the 1950s loved the word better. Better skin tone, better texture, better poise, better living through the purchase of another small container with a gold lid and a promise large enough to fill the room. You can imagine the nightly order of things: hair set under a scarf, face rubbed with cream, tissues piled by the basin, powder box closed with a click, while the radio murmurs about weather and dishwasher detergent. The bathroom stays serene through all of it. The towels remain folded. The chrome remains cheerful. The shelf keeps its secrets in rows so tidy that the secrets almost seem to have good manners. Then your hand reaches for the hormone cream. Its jar is nearly identical to the shaving cream Harold favors every morning. Both are pale pink. Both are smooth-sided. One promises firmer female radiance, and one promises a closer shave, which is a very 1950s sort of filing mistake. Harold has been using yours by accident for months. He scoops it with perfect confidence. He lathers his cheeks with what is technically a rejuvenating estrogen cream. He has not noticed any changes, and you have not felt the need to begin that conversation before coffee. Estrogen creams were sold with a remarkable openness. The boxes often said hormone right on the front. Rejuvenation was the word of choice. A woman did not need a prescription for many of these preparations, because the beauty aisle and the medicine cabinet still shared a pleasantly blurred fence. The cream itself often looked luxurious. It could be peachy pink or pearl white. It sat dense in the jar and left a glossy trail on the finger. It smelled of roses, talc, and expensive hope. Directions were airy to the point of poetry. Apply nightly, massage gently, use regularly for younger-looking skin. There was very little about dose, duration, or who exactly ought to be rubbing extra estrogen into her cheeks before bed. Some jars called it tissue cream. Some said vitalizing cream. Some used the phrase female hormone as casually as if listing lanolin, The tone suggested that modern science had kindly arranged a small miracle for the bathroom shelf. Pharmacies stocked these creams in plain sight. They stood near cleansing milk and orange lipstick. The clerk did not lower his voice. Nobody handed over a note from a doctor or asked whether your pores had consulted their family physician. Women used them around the eyes and mouth. They worked them into the throat with upward strokes. They were told the cream would soften lines and wake sleepy tissue. Tissue in these ads seemed very lazy and constantly in need of encouragement. The lack of dosage guidance now feels almost dreamy. A medicine would usually demand exactness. A cosmetic asked for faith and a fingertip. The line between them could be as thin as the paper seal under the lid. That line stayed thin because the market liked it that way. A cream sounding medical felt advanced. A cream counted as a cosmetic faced fewer obstacles, so brands lingered happily on the fence with one polished shoe on either side. Harold comes in while you are reading the carton. He reaches past the cold cream and takes the wrong jar again. He hums. He is, at this point, one of the more consistent case studies in the room. You watch him spread it over his jaw. The cream turns clear as he rubs. He says, "The texture is excellent this winter." It would be hard to design a better picture of how loose these categories once were. No one at the jar offered him much guidance. No warning box interrupted the roses. No dosage chart arrived folded inside. There was simply the old promise of smoother, younger skin and the general feeling that science had everything well in hand. Science in this corner of the drugstore wore pearls. It also wore lipstick named Dawn Pink. It reclined on velvet in magazine ads. It assured women that hormones, metals, and mystery extracts were perfectly domesticated once poured into charming containers. That confidence was part of the sales spell. The customer saw modernity. She saw experts. She saw proof in the form of neat diagrams and approving doctors. She did not see much real oversight standing between a claim and the cash register. Cosmetic regulation had soft elbows then. A company did not need the same kind of pre-market blessing expected for a drug. Labels could be spare. Claims could drift. A handsome box could travel a long way on charm alone. If trouble emerged, it often emerged slowly. A complaint might reach officials. A warning might appear. A brand might adjust language or swap formulas in time, though not always in any hurry that would impress a modern lawyer. Meanwhile, the mustache doctors kept smiling from the labels. They hovered over mercury creams, lead-lace smoothers, and estrogen jars with equal serenity. Their illustrations made every formula feel as if it had just passed a careful exam and been told to go home and rest. There were real tests sometimes. A patch could be placed on the arm. Volunteers could report stinging or redness. A manufacturer could honestly say tested after a very small and very convenient trial, then let the public imagine the rest. Tested and safe are cousins, not twins. Advertising liked to seat them beside each other at dinner and let the reader assume a family resemblance. A woman buying night cream after groceries was not usually in the mood to ask for laboratory records. The shelf itself encourages trust. Glass feels serious. A screw top feels sealed and proper. Tiny print gives the impression that someone somewhere has thought terribly hard about all this, even when the tiny print is mostly weight and perfume. That is why the ingredient list startles now. Mercury for freckles, lead for smoothness, estrogen for renewal, all nestled among rose scent, lanolin, and the sort of pink branding that makes danger look as harmless as a birthday cake. It was not hidden in secret clubs or back rooms. These were mainstream products in ordinary pharmacies. They came home in shopping bags with soap, cotton balls, and maybe a new shade of nail polish that claimed to match spring tulips. The absurdity lies in the calmness of it. No dramatic music played when the lid came off. No clerk fainted near the register. The jar simply sat there in the morning light, looking sweet and respectable while containing a rather bolder idea of skincare than most people guessed. Betty finally notices the small print on her clipping. She squints at the ingredient line and says the word mercury as if trying on a brooch. Then she shrugs, because the girl in the picture has lovely skin and because the article mentions modern research in cheerful italics. The Avon lady nods, as though that settles everything. She flicks to a page of complexion aids in her catalog. Several wear medical language like costume jewelry. One offers scientific freshness, which sounds like something a refrigerator might promise. No one in the room is especially troubled. That is the part that feels most distant now. The products inspire curiosity more than fear. They belong to an age when authority could be printed in Navy script and accepted with a smile. You set the jars back in their places. The cold cream returns beside the powder compact. The freckle tube lies near the hand mirror. Dr. Beaumont resumes his watch from 3 labels at once, still calm, still neatly mustached. The bathroom looks the same as it did an hour ago. That is the trick of this chapter of beauty history. The shelf remains pastel and orderly, only the mind has changed, and even that change arrives slowly, like powder settling after the puff is set down. Soon the house will want breakfast and ordinary tasks. The cream lids will close, the towels will stay neat. Somewhere on the block, another woman will smooth a doctor-approved lotion over her face and think only of softness, freshness, and a better mirror tomorrow. And here in your bright little bathroom, the jars keep their quiet company. They smell of roses and powder and something chemical beneath it all. They wait in the chrome-lit stillness, full of promises, full of secrets, and full of Dr. Beaumont's deeply reassuring mustache. The lipstick drawer slides open with a soft wooden sigh beneath the bright chrome edge of the sink. Morning light falls across the silver tubes like little parked cars. Each one promises a different future in a neat block of gold letters. You choose the coral shade with the smoothest case and the least chipped cap. It smells faintly of wax, violet powder, and something older beneath both. The stick rises with a tiny twist, firm as a candle, and much more ambitious. It goes on cool at first, and then softer as it meets the warmth of your mouth. The color settles into the small lines of the lips with impressive confidence. A tissue waits nearby because this shade never travels alone. There is a practiced little routine to it all. Upper lip first, lower lip next. Blot once, purse, and leave a perfect pink print that looks very sure of itself. On the vanity shelf, the labels speak in soft claims. They mention smoothness, lasting charm, scientific blending, and the advice of experts. None of them speak in a loud voice about what helped the color behave so nicely. Some older lipstick and rouge formulas still leaned on lead compounds to do their quiet work. They helped the color sit evenly and kept the texture creamy. They could make a stubborn red stay put with the patience of a church husher. That pleasant drag of the lipstick bullet had chemistry behind it. The stick did not crumble in the purse on a warm day. It did not streak too much across the top lip. It kept its shape through coffee, gossip, and a surprisingly windy trip to the butcher. Rouge had its own neat tricks. The pan could stay silky instead of dusty. The color could cling to the puff instead of floating around like pink weather. A little smoothing help made the whole compact seem better bred. You can almost feel it in the way the powder glides. It is soft, but not airy. It is creamy, but not damp. It seems to know exactly how much cheek it intends to occupy. Very few jars put it plainly on the front. They preferred calm phrases and brisk little ingredient lists in tiny type. A woman needed excellent eyesight, steady nerves, and perhaps a magnifying glass from the sewing basket. Betty from next door arrives just as the rouge puff touches one cheekbone. She lets herself in with the confidence of a parade marshal. In her hand is a new lipstick from a magazine ad, and she is already in love with it. She says it is called Sunset Actress and will change everything by Thursday. She says it has new scientific color hold and never feathers. She has not read the ingredient list, and this only deepens her trust. You turn the tube in the light and watch the color catch. Betty admires the shine on the metal case and the shade on the tissue. Nobody asks what gives it that obedient little grip. That was often the mood of the beauty counter. If the red was rich and the finish was smooth, the rest could stay politely out of sight. The 1950s beauty trade ran on what historians kindly call the honor system. That is a very gentle way to say it ran on almost nothing at all. A company could sound respectable, print a mustache on the box, and carry on. The bathroom cabinet accepted this with the calm of a hotel lobby. Beside the lipstick sits a row of smaller jars and pressed cakes in peach, scarlet, and dusky rose. Some have little printed numbers tucked under the shade names. They look tidy and official, which was part of the charm. Those numbers often pointed to the new world of synthetic color. Coal tar dyes had moved from smoky industry into powder puffs and lipstick bullets. They came with names and codes that sounded like they belonged in a filing cabinet. The colors were bold in a way old plant dyes rarely managed. Red stayed red, orange stayed orange, pink did not wake up brown by noon and pretend nothing had happened. A woman in 1955 could buy nearly the same cherry mouth in Chicago, Phoenix, or Des Moines. That sort of repeatable brightness delighted makers and magazines alike. Hollywood liked a dependable crimson as much as the rest of the country. Some labels carried the initials FD and C. They stood for food, drugs, and cosmetics, which sounded broad and comforting. It gave a little puff of safety to a compact the size of a biscuit. The dyes themselves came out of a much less fluffy place. Coal tar was the dark leftover from making gas and coke. Chemists teased bright colors from it with the same brisk confidence people used for cake mixes and home perms. Beauty firms wanted these shades very badly. Natural colors faded, spoiled, or varied from batch to batch, like moody strawberries. Synthetic dyes offered order, brightness, and large, reliable shipments in a very orderly box. So the industry pushed hard to keep certain coal tar colors approved for beauty use. Regulators did not ban the whole family of dyes. Instead, some colors got certified and numbered, which sounded almost parental. That is how the vanity shelf acquired its little alphabet soup. Red this number, orange that number, a bit of lake color here and a bit of white base there, all arranged under names like Youth Coral and Gala Rose. If a batch passed, it could go into lipstick, rouge, and other cheerful places. If it failed, a maker might grumble and reformulate, at least on paper. The rules existed, though not with the stoutness people now imagine. The FDA's authority over cosmetics in 1955 had roughly the muscle of a strongly worded Yelp review. Companies could more or less ignore it, and often did so with excellent posture. The boxes still looked wonderfully respectable while this happened. Your bathroom vanity in 1955 was basically an unboxing haul channel in porcelain and crime. Instead of discount gadgets, each pastel jar held a neat little mystery. Sometimes the mystery was just face powder, and sometimes it was more adventurous. Betty reads a shade card upside down and declares the modern age a triumph. She is very taken with any color that arrives with a number. A number seems scientific, and science in a lipstick tube felt terribly glamorous. She dabs the new shade on the back of her hand. It leaves a clean stripe like enamel on a toy car. The color is lovely, and nobody in the room is thinking about gasworks. When she finally goes home, the bathroom grows quiet again. The ticking of the wall clock returns. A damp washcloth cools the rouge puff and leaves a faint pink moon on the porcelain edge. Near the cold cream sits a much smaller box with far grander ambitions. It is narrow and pale, with delicate script along one side. In the center is Dr. Beaumont, serene as ever, offering his mustache to science. Nobody has met Dr. Beaumont. Nobody seems bothered by this. His mustache suggests deep learning, and in 1955, that carried a surprising amount of freight. The box holds eye drops meant to make the eyes look wide and soft. The promise is not shouted, but it hums there all the same. A starlit stare could apparently be bottled and kept beside the cotton balls. The trick was old even then. Victorian women had already borrowed it from belladonna, a plant with a dramatic reputation and very good publicity. Beauty routines have always loved a dangerous flower if it comes in a charming bottle. Inside the drops was atropine from belladonna, also called deadly nightshade when people wanted the name to do more work. In tiny amounts, it widened the pupils. Wider pupils looked dreamy in lamplight, and even better in studio portraits. The bottle itself is almost shy. Clear glass, small rubber top, a narrow dropper that asks for steady hands and a good mirror. One drop could make the room look a touch brighter and a touch softer at once. The pupils opened up while the near world drifted gently backward. Sewing became less appealing, though staring elegantly into middle distance became much easier. Women had known this look for a long time. The eyes seemed larger, The dark center took up more space. A face could look tender, vague, and deeply interested in a man talking about his new lawnmower. There was a price for this sort of romance. Bright daylight could feel bossy. Reading tiny print became a small act of faith. The mirror looked lovely, but the recipe card on the icebox might as well have moved to another county. Still, the box sat there among very ordinary things. It leaned against talc. It shared space with bobby pins and a pearl comb. It looked no more troubling than aspirin or cold cream. Dr. Beaumont's printed face helped with that. His gaze suggested calm authority and very clean cuffs. If a mustache drawing told you a drop would improve your gaze, the nation was inclined to listen. The Avon lady chooses this exact moment to tap at the front door. It is Tuesday, which is her sacred hour of interruption. She enters with her case, her catalog, and a perfume cloud that could have located itself from space. You are half bent over the mirror when she appears in the bathroom doorway. She says she has a new eye brightener that all the girls are asking for. She has not read the small print, and she never will. The room blurs just slightly at the edges as the belladonna begins its quiet work. Her lipstick shade card becomes a rosy haze. Even the chrome faucet seems to have become a little more poetic than usual. Then Harold wanders in with his razor and his usual confidence around other people's products. He has already used your hormone face cream as shaving cream again this morning. This makes his second mistaken product event before breakfast, which is impressive even for Harold. Now he picks up the eye drop box and asks if this is for razor burn. He turns Dr. Beaumont upside down and studies the mustache with professional interest. You remove it from his hand with the gentleness usually reserved for jam near a white sofa. Harold nods as if this was his plan all along. He reaches instead for his actual shaving lotion. Its bottle is also pale pink, because the bathroom seems committed to a certain visual confusion. He has not noticed any changes from the hormone cream. You have not told him. Married life often rests on these small, quiet agreements, along with folded towels and the location of the good scissors. When the bathroom settles again, the eye makeup tray waits beside the sink. There is a cake mascara in a little black tin. Its lid opens with a click like a tiny piano key. A stiff brush lies across it like a miniature hairbrush for ants. Before use, the brush must be dampened. This ritual made millions of women pause over the sink with the concentration of watercolor painters. Some used tap water from the cold chrome stream. Some used lotion. Some used whatever was handy. And history draws a polite veil over the rest. The cake darkens where the brush touches it. A black paste forms in a neat little crescent. It smells of wax, soap, and a chemical sharpness that suggests determination. Early mascara liked simple building blocks with complicated side jobs. There were waxes to coat the lashes. There were soaks or gums to help the color spread. There were dark pigments, sometimes from carbon black, and sometimes from the same synthetic dye world already sitting in the lipstick drawer. The lashes needed to separate instead of clump into 6 brave spikes. They needed to dry fast enough for a woman to blink. They needed to survive tears, steam, and a bus stop breeze without sliding down the cheek by lunch. That was where preservatives entered with their quiet little shoes. A damp cake kept in a warm bathroom could invite unwelcome fuzz and other tiny guests. Some makers slipped in germ fighters with the same calm tone used for fragrance. Some formulas used preservative chemistry that sounds rather brisk now. Tiny amounts of mercury compounds turned up in certain eye products, because bacteria were bad for business. The eyes apparently were expected to be understanding about this arrangement. Other lash paints and liners leaned on sharp-smelling helpers that kept the formula stable and the shelf life respectable. A product might promise softness while hiding a sting in the wings. The customer mainly met that sting as a watery blink after application. The eyes could prickle a bit. Lids could redden just enough to seem mysterious rather than cross. Many women simply blamed the weather, their nerves, or a poor night's sleep. Eyeliner had its own small chemistry lesson tucked into a pencil or pot. Waxes made it glide. Oils kept it from snapping. Dark pigment did the serious work of making the lashes appear thicker than the truth. Some liners used shellac to help the lines set and stay. Some brought along fragrance, because almost everything in the bathroom liked to smell pleasant. Pleasant smell and mild irritation were apparently considered close neighbors. A woman would sit close to the mirror and pull the lid very gently with one finger. Then came the careful line along the lashes. It was always a little more difficult on the second eye, which had to be done by the less diplomatic hand. If the room was warm, the pencil softened beautifully. If it was too warm, the point became friendly with the lower lid by noon. The lines smudged in a way magazines called alluring and mothers called untidy. Mascara brushes were not always washed as often as they deserved. Cake tins snapped shut while still a touch damp. The bathroom shelf held its own weather, full of steam from baths and traces of face powder, and preservatives had to keep up as best they could. The Avon lady returns to the doorway holding a sample of waterproof lash lacquer like a sacred relic. She says film stars use it for swimming scenes. She says nothing at all about the sharp little list on the back. Her case smells of rose, talc, and fresh ink from the catalog pages. The sample wand smells of solvent and hope. You try a little on one lash and feel the faint, cool bite that means modern beauty is hard at work. It dries quickly and makes the lashes look darker and more exact. It also makes blinking feel slightly more official. The eye notices this before the mirror does. She praises the finish while flipping pages with a pink polish nail. There are powders, creams, liners, brighteners, and miracle sticks enough to fill a modest tackle box. The whole vanity feels like a department store having a very private thought. By now, the bathroom counter is crowded with open things. A lipstick without its cap. A rouge compact with a puff half out. The belladonna box resting beside the mascara tin as if this were the most normal friendship in the world. The colors themselves remain lovely. That was always the difficulty. A coral mouth, a cherry cheek, and lashes dark as fountain pen ink could make the morning look neatly arranged. And so the odd ingredients kept finding a place. Lead smoothed. Coal tar dyes brightened. Belladonna widened. Preservatives guarded the damp little world inside the mascara cake with methods that seemed clever at the time. Nobody stood at the sink thinking in those exact terms. She thought about whether the lipstick would last through bridge club. She thought about whether the liner matched the dress. She thought about whether Betty's new coral was just a little too sure of itself. The labels made it all sound trim and trustworthy. Approved colors, scientific formulas, doctor faces printed right on the box, complete with a mustache that might have deserved its own medical degree. Harold passes the doorway again, now properly shaved and none the wiser. He asks if anyone has seen his shaving brush. It is sitting in plain sight beside the belladonna drops, which feels somehow on brand for the household. You hand it over without comment. He thanks you and wanders off humming. The morning survives another round with the bathroom cabinet. In the mirror, the pupils do look wider. The lipstick is certainly staying put. The lashes sit in obedient dark rows, though the left eye has begun a discreet little protest. A cotton pad cools the lid and leaves a gray shadow on the white fluff. The sink holds rings of water, black specks from mascara, and one polite coral print on the rim of a cup. Beauty work was glamorous in magazines and surprisingly crumbly in real life. On the shelf, shade names line up like tiny promises. Pink Dawn, Movie Rose, Brunette Brown, which owes more to chemistry than heaven usually does. That was the curious charm of the 1950s bathroom. Everything looked clean, modern, and managed. Under the rosewater and hairspray lived a faint chemical note, like the house itself had just finished a lab exercise. No single jar announced itself as sinister. The danger, when it appeared, wore pastel labels and excellent manners. It arrived folded into smooth texture, bright color, or an eye made wider for a party. The past often did things this way. It hid the strange parts inside the routine parts. A woman simply reached for her lipstick, dampened her mascara brush, and trusted the room to know what it was doing. Sometimes the room did know. Sometimes it was guessing in a very polished accent. Cosmetics in 1955 were sold with a confidence that far exceeded the paperwork. The vanity shelf shines on anyway. Chrome catches the light. Towels stay folded into perfect thirds. The little army of jars and tubes waits for another morning with patient pastel composure. You set the lipstick back in its place and close the eye drop box with one careful thumb. Dr. Beaumont returns to stillness on the label. His mustache remains deeply reassuring and, as ever, entirely unearned. Then the drawer slides shut, with all its bright secrets inside. The bathroom smells of powder, soap, Aquanet, and that faint chemical whisper below everything else. It is all very tidy, very modern, and just a little strange in the dim way the past liked best. On the highest shelf, the new spray can waits beside the cold cream and cotton balls. Its cap is pale pink. Its body shines like a tiny rocket that somehow chose domestic life. You pick it up. The metal feels cool and a little damp from the morning air. The bathroom is already doing its usual performance of tidy charm. Chrome taps catch the light. The towels sit folded into perfect thirds beside the sink. Rose water hangs in the air. Aquanet lingers underneath it with something sweeter, sharper, and faintly mechanical. The can promises ease in cheerful script. It promises hold, grace, and a salon finish before breakfast. It is one of those objects that makes a woman feel modern without leaving the house. A few years earlier, beauty meant bottles, pins, rollers, and a fair bit of handwork. Now the finger presses a neat white button. A hiss answers at once. The cloud comes out even and fine. It lands on hair, tiles, and the little doily under the powder jar. There is something soothing about that hiss. It sounds efficient and expensive in a very American way. The aerosol can arrived like a small domestic miracle. It spared wrists and made effort seem almost rude. Inside the bright cylinder, invisible helpers did the pushing. Sometimes those helpers were early freon gases. Sometimes they were vinyl chloride, which sounds less like beauty and more like plumbing. Still, the label smiled sweetly. Nobody at the vanity was invited into that part of the conversation. You only noticed that the can felt oddly cold after a long spray. You noticed the mist reached the back of the head without acrobatics. You noticed your set looked finished faster than yesterday. That was more than enough in a busy morning. The government kept a mild eye on these things, in the way a sleepy cat keeps a mild eye on birds. Its authority over cosmetics in 1955 had roughly the muscle of a strongly worded Yelp review. Companies could more or less ignore it. Many did so with a breezy confidence that now feels almost athletic. So the bathroom shelf became a cheerful chemistry counter in pastel wrappers. The mystery stayed inside the can. The hiss did the rest. On Tuesdays, the Avon lady often arrived exactly when the bathroom air had turned into a perfumed weather system. She would stand at the door with her catalog open and blink through the cloud politely. Her briefcase held powders, lipsticks, creams, and at least one new spray with a name about moonlight. She had never once read the small print. She did not plan to begin in your hallway. By the late decade, Aquanet joined the shelf with the confidence of a starlet entering church. Its can looked brisk and practical. Its promise was not modest in the least. This was no mist for casual fluffing. This was architecture in a can. You had already set the hair the night before, with rollers, lotion, and a scarf tied under the chin. Morning meant removing pins one by one. Morning meant coaxing the curls into exactly the right soft helmet. Then came the spray. Aquanet and its cousins worked with resins and lacquer. Some formulas leaned on shellac to make each hair behave. The idea was simple in a deeply strange way. Coat the strands with a thin varnish and call it glamour. The smell sat heavy and familiar. It mixed alcohol sweetness with the hard little edge of a workshop. A woman would hold her breath for a moment. She would squint and aim carefully at the crown. The mist settled over bangs, ears, shoulders, and the sink. A fine sticky film reached the mirror by noon. Another reached the window, the faucet, and the cat-eye glasses case. If you touched the hair too soon, the surface gave a tiny, tacky protest. If you waited, the style held still with a patience usually seen in statues. Church, grocery shopping, bridge club, and the late afternoon mail could all happen beneath that lacquered calm. A stiff breeze might trouble the hem of a skirt. The hair would remain in geological stillness. Brushes learned not to argue too hard with such arrangements. A comb passed lightly over the top. It did not pry. Women kept tissues near the vanity for overspray. They kept bobby pins in saucers and extra rollers in old candy tins. Many cracked a window before spraying, though mostly because the smell was rather a lot. The bathroom could seem half boudoir and half small repair shop. Dr. Beaumont smiled serenely from one neighboring jar with his dark mustache and excellent posture. Nobody had met Dr. Beaumont, yet his face suggested he approved of every lotion in America personally. That mustache did a great deal of quiet regulatory work. Betty from next door once drifted in during a particularly vigorous spray session and refused to be discouraged. She came armed with a clipping from Ladies' Home Journal and a fresh opinion about volume. Her enthusiasm for a product was always strongest before anyone mentioned ingredients, directions, or common sense. She said the new formula would change your life. She said this while blinking lacquer from her eyelashes. Then she borrowed your hand mirror and admired herself in the fog. Near the tub, another sort of promise waited in a squat little jar with a neat screw lid. This one did not hiss. It sat quietly and pretended to be respectable. Depilatory creams had their own place in the beauty cabinet. They promised smooth legs, smooth arms, and peace with any troublesome little patch of hair. Coremlu was among the more memorable names, though not for reasons the label intended. You might open the jar after a bath when the room was warm and steamy. A little spatula rested inside. The cream itself looked pale, thick, and obedient. The scent tried hard to be floral. Something beneath the flowers remained stubbornly medicinal and metallic. The directions were brisk and cheerful. Apply thinly, wait a few minutes, and wipe away. Beauty directions in that era often had the tone of a recipe card for a very odd dessert. What made Coremlu seem especially modern was not just the removal, which sounded like a miracle with nice packaging. The trick behind that miracle was thallium acetate. That was not a pretty plant extract. That was a chemical with talents far beyond a tidy ankle. In tiny print, it sat among the ingredients as if it belonged beside perfume and cream base. Many women never saw the list. Many who saw it had no reason to find it strange. Why would they? The 1950s beauty industry operated on what historians politely call the honor system. That is a diplomatic way of saying almost nobody was checking very hard, and everyone seemed weirdly relaxed. So jars like Coremlu went cheerfully onto bathroom shelves beside talc and face powder. They looked harmless among the pastels. The labels behaved beautifully. You would smooth the cream with the flat edge of the little spatula. Then, you would wait on the bath mat in your robe, reading half a magazine ad. The cream began to dry around the edges. The bathroom clock ticked with great confidence. Afterward, a damp cloth took it off in slow, creamy strokes. The skin felt strangely bare and faintly cool. At first, the results seemed almost too good. That should have made someone curious. Instead, it made the product sound clever. Then came the quiet trouble, which entered not like scandal, but like a soft confusion. Some women felt odd in ways no depilatory had advertised. Some felt weak, numb, or simply not quite right. Hair might thin where nobody had requested thinning. Hands and feet might begin complaining in low, private ways. Doctors began comparing notes. Medical journals cleared their throats in a dry, professional murmur. The scandal, if one can call it that, was very polite at first. It did not kick down doors. It arrived in columns, case reports, and worried little conversations. That seemed to be how many beauty troubles moved in those years. They started in bathrooms, they drifted to clinics, they reached the papers only after everyone had finished breakfast. Coremlu was eventually pulled back from its glamorous duties. By then, plenty of jars had already enjoyed a full social season in American cabinets. Dr. Beaumont was not available for comment, though his mustache remained deeply reassuring on nearby labels. By afternoon, the vanity shelf often turned from hair removal to hair encouragement with no change in mood. One jar promised less hair. The next promised more of it, but only on the scalp. There is something almost touching about that arrangement. Hair tonics and scalp stimulators stood in ranks like small soldiers of hope, though gentler and much shinier. Their bottles were handsome in a pharmacy way. Green glass was common, and so were neat metal tops. Some had little sprinkler caps. Some had pour spouts that looked perfectly happy near a salad bowl. You dabbed the tonic along the part with careful lines. Then you rubbed it in with your fingertips. The scalp answered with a cool tingle or a sharp sting, depending on how ambitious the formula felt. A tonic often smelled of bay rum, menthol, witch hazel, or violet. Then came the stronger note beneath, which was usually alcohol and sometimes rather a lot of it. Many scalp products promised to wake sleepy follicles as though the hair had merely overslept. Some even showed brisk before and after sketches on the box to keep spirits up. The contents could be less charming than the drawings. Strong alcohols were common, so were acetone, petroleum solvents, and other helpers better suited to varnish than vanity. A woman might not know the names. She knew the sensation. The liquid flashed cold on the scalp. It dried fast and left the fingers smelling faintly industrial. Another could make the eyes water if applied with too much zeal. A little dripped behind the ear. A little stained the crocheted doily under the bottle. Plenty of these products advertised themselves as greaseless, antiseptic, invigorating, or scientific. Scientific was a favorite word then. It covered a multitude of moods and not a few solvents. Your bathroom vanity in 1955 was essentially an unboxing haul channel. Only instead of discount electronics, the mystery item inside was occasionally mild organ damage. Still, the labels remained lovely. The fonts were graceful, and the colors were very kind. The liquids themselves could be amber, ruby, or perfectly clear. Some came in ribbed glass bottles with paper seals at the neck. Others had corks that always looked slightly improvised, no matter what the box had promised. The shelf grew sticky in rings. Dust settled on the shoulders of the bottles. Every few days, you wiped them down with a damp cloth and lined them up again. That orderliness was part of the charm. A bathroom cabinet in the 1950s could look like a shrine to neatness while hiding a small lab behind the lilac labels. Progress did love a polished surface. Betty from next door returned one Thursday with a scalp stimulator she swore had transformed a cousin in Toledo. She tapped the bottle proudly and said you could feel it working at once. That was true enough, though one might also say the same of furniture polish. She read the slogan out loud. She skipped the ingredients entirely with impressive speed. Then she asked if Dr. Beaumont was a real doctor. Neither of you answered. Harold entered this world of tonics and creams only by accident, which was still far too often. The bathroom shelf looked orderly to you. To Harold, it looked like a shelf full of identical ambitions. He already mistook your hormone face cream for shaving cream on a regular basis. The jars were the same size. They were also the same very diplomatic pink. He had noticed no changes. You had not troubled him with an update. The hair tonic confusion happened on a warm evening, with iceberg lettuce and sliced tomatoes. A grocery bag had landed on the hall table beside a paper sack from the drugstore. Later, someone put one bottle in the pantry and one in the bathroom without deep reflection. The tonic was in green glass with a narrow neck and tidy pour top. The dressing was in green glass with a narrow neck and tidy pour top. Harold, overworked servant that he was, reached for the wrong one with complete household confidence. You heard the small glug before you turned around. A thin amber ribbon fell over the lettuce. The room filled with bay rum, menthol, and a note from the paint shop. Harold paused and frowned at the bowl. He said the new dressing smelled brisk. He said perhaps it was French. You took the bottle from his hand and read the label again, mostly to enjoy the absurdity. It promised richer-looking hair, livelier roots, and masculine freshness. It did not say much about romaine. The salad was quietly retired. Harold accepted the correction with the calm of a man who had long ago surrendered to bathroom packaging. Then he asked where the proper dressing had gone, which felt very much in character. That was the trouble with beauty products in that neat, bright decade. They dressed themselves as harmless little luxuries, then borrowed ingredients from garages, labs, and hardware counters. A can hissed and called itself progress. A jar promised smoothness and kept certain details to itself. A tonic tingled briskly enough to suggest virtue. A label added flowers and hoped for the best. All around them, the room remained spotless. The towels stayed folded. The chrome kept shining in the mild square of morning sun. The vanity shelf looked as sweet as a candy counter, with better posture. If you stood there in your robe, comb in hand, the whole scene felt comforting. Pastel labels faced forward. Powder puffs rested in their dishes like tame little clouds. The strange part was how ordinary it all seemed. No villain lurked in the cabinet. Only products, promises, and that very 1950s trust in cheerful packaging. The can that smelled like progress was not trying to be mysterious. It sat where you left it, bright and useful, beside the cold cream and the pearls. When you pressed the button, it answered with its practiced hiss. The mist rose again into the warm bathroom air, smelling of roses, lacquer, and the future. And the future in that lovely suburban cabinet often smelled faintly chemical underneath it all. At the very back of the bathroom cabinet, behind the witch hazel and cotton balls, stands the brown bottle nobody discusses. Its label looks sober and tidy in the morning light. The chrome tap flashes beside it. The towels sit folded into perfect thirds, as if good manners could steady chemistry. You reach past cold cream and rose lotion to touch the bottle. The glass feels thick and old. It smells sharp even through the closed cap. Lysol, in this neat suburban bathroom, has a second career that would now seem almost dreamlike. It was sold as a cleaner. It was also sold for feminine hygiene. The ads did not mumble this point. They printed it plainly in magazines. They used clean little words that sounded like a nurse straightening her cuffs. One ad promised feminine hygiene in a calm serif font. Another praised delicate cleanliness. Another spoke of intimate care with the cheer of a toothpaste notice. The language was always so clipped and clinical. Disinfection sat beside roses and smiling wives. Germicidal appeared near satin slips and breakfast trays. A woman could open Ladies' Home Journal beside her grapefruit half and coffee cup. There, between cake recipes and curtain ideas, Lysol would speak in a doctorly hush. The copy liked to suggest that married life could turn chilly from one neglected little detail. It never raised its voice. It simply set down a concern like a folded napkin. Some ads said a wife might not realize one intimate neglect could matter so much. Other ads promised to protect feminine allure. The bottle sat there, brown and practical, pretending this was entirely ordinary. And for years, it was treated as ordinary enough. It stayed in medicine cabinets. It hid behind talcum and hairpins. It wore the modest costume of household respectability. The strange part is how little mystery the label allowed. It was advertised for douching. The wording was soft. The meaning was not especially hidden. A woman in 1953 could be told this by a magazine page and a pale drawing of flowers. She could also be told it was safe when diluted. The little bottle stood there like a quiet aunt with very firm opinions. In those years, the beauty industry and the bathroom shelf trusted what historians politely call the honor system. That is a diplomatic way of saying almost nobody checked much, and everyone seemed remarkably relaxed. The federal rules around cosmetics in 1955 had about the force of a strongly worded Yelp review. A company could read the concern. It could then continue cheerfully bottling whatever it liked. So the cabinet became a place of layered roles. A cleaner could be an intimate wash. A polish could promise youth. A tiny jar could suggest new happiness before luncheon. If you unscrew the Lysol cap, the smell cuts through rosewater at once. It is medicinal and brisk. It is less boudoir than railway station waiting room. The ads worked hard to soften that fact. They showed fresh linens. They showed women with smooth waves and pearl earrings. They showed bathrooms that looked a little like yours, only even shinier. No ad liked to mention discomfort. No ad liked to mention how robust the stuff really was. It preferred the word dainty, which the bottle itself could not possibly have invented. There is something almost sweetly absurd in the arrangement. The same product might mop a kitchen floor on Monday. By Tuesday, it appeared in a magazine promising to save a marriage with science and fragrance. Harold, for his part, would never notice the difference in the cabinet. He is still using your pale pink hormone cream as shaving cream. Several months have passed. and neither of you has seen a reason to interrupt him. The Lysol bottle settles back into its shadow behind the bandages. Beside it sits a cream jar with a lid like a tiny silver moon. That little jar carries a different sort of promise. On the middle shelf, one complexion cream catches the light as if it has swallowed a pale winter morning. The label has gold trim. The glass has a faint milky glow. Its scent is powdery and old-fashioned. There is violet in it. There is cold cream. There is also the dusty thrill of laboratory magic. By the 1950s, the big radio glow craze had faded from its loudest years. Yet some beauty products still drifted forward from the 1930s, carrying traces of that earlier enthusiasm in their formulas and advertising. Though radio had made the idea seem bright and modern years before, the name itself sounded like a tram stop on the way to the future. Some creams boasted thorium as if it were another kind of sunshine. A jar might promise liveliness for tired skin. It might mention radiance with great confidence. It might hint that modern science had finally arranged a private dawn just for your cheeks. The texture was usually rich and a little waxy. It sat on the skin in a smooth film. It left a faint powder scent on hand towels and pillowcases. Some women dabbed it on before church. Some used it after a bath when the room was fogged with steam. Some kept the jar near the mirror beside cuticle scissors and a coral comb. The labels often looked perfectly respectable. Cream paper, script lettering, perhaps a calm, suited face printed nearby, and perhaps that face belonged to Dr. Beaumont and his deeply reassuring mustache. Nobody in this bathroom has ever met Dr. Beaumont. He appears on tonics, creams, and scalp treatments with magnificent consistency. He seems to have earned a medical degree entirely through portraiture. The promise of a healthy glow could mean almost anything then. It could mean color. It could mean smoothness. It could mean a whisper of radioactivity drifting in from an earlier decade and refusing to leave politely. Not every jar on every shelf held thorium, of course. Yet enough survived in memory and stock that the idea still lingered. A little brightness in a bottle sounded modern in the way chrome toasters sounded modern. Your bathroom vanity in 1955 is almost an unboxing haul channel in porcelain and chrome. Instead of discount gadgets, the mystery item inside might occasionally contain a very energetic opinion about your bloodstream. Still, the cream feels innocent enough beneath one fingertip. It is cool at first. Then it melts softly. It leaves the skin satin slick and faintly perfumed. The jar lid clicks shut with a small, polite sound. Nearby, the deodorant shelf waits in a trim row. Those bottles and jars have a much sharper idea of improvement. The antiperspirants stand shoulder to shoulder in mint, peach, and pale blue packaging. Their labels promise calm underarms and dry chiffon. Their caps are smooth as hard candy. The smell here is different from cold cream and violet. It is more mineral. It has a sour little edge. Under the talc, something metallic lingers like rain on a fire escape. Early antiperspirants liked aluminum chloride very much. It was effective. It was also famous for being somewhat cross about the whole business. A woman would paint it on with a cotton pad or a little roller. Then she would wait with her arms lifted slightly away from her sides. This posture was elegant for perhaps 7 seconds. After that, the sting might begin. The skin could prickle. A fresh razor did not improve matters. Cotton nightgowns and patience were both considered useful equipment. Manufacturers promised confidence through card parties and summer buses. They also suggested that dampness was a social emergency of the first order. The products themselves responded with chemistry that seemed to take this very seriously indeed. One bottle might advise night use only. Another might warn against broken skin in tiny letters tucked near the seam. A third would smile through it all with a pastel flower and no further comment. Aluminum zirconium tetrachlorohydrex joined the shelf later with a name that sounds like a train timetable composed during a headache. Yet there it was, printed cheerfully on labels nobody read before breakfast. The debate around these ingredients was already humming in a low domestic way. Did they irritate skin? Did they stain dresses? Did they clog what ought not be clogged? The questions floated around beauty counters like powder. Some women swore by them because they worked. Some women swore at them because they also worked in a rather stern fashion. The armpit, it turned out, had become a frontier of determined modern management. White blouses sometimes kept a faint crust at the seams. Slip straps needed washing more often in July. A woman might fan each underarm with a magazine page while pinning on her earrings. Betty from next door is especially loyal to products that promise social ease in one easy step. She likes anything introduced with the phrase, "new laboratory formula," which to her means destiny has finally arrived in a tube. She appears one afternoon with a magazine clipping and a solemn expression. Then she produces a cream deodorant from her handbag, like a magician revealing a dove. She has not looked at the ingredient list once. Betty reports that it leaves absolutely no trace, which is a brave statement for a product that can lightly season a silk blouse. She dabs some on the back of her wrist. The room smells briefly like lemon furniture polish in a chapel. You nod kindly because this is what suburban civilization requires. Betty admires your towels. You admire her confidence. The deodorant tin sits between you both like a pact with chemistry. When she leaves, the bathroom is quiet again except for the hum of the vent. The shelf gleams with little jars that promise dryness, freshness, and poise. They all sound like finishing school with a metal aftertaste. Below them, beside bath salts and a pumice stone, another set of promises waits in round tubs. These are the reducing creams. They are stout, hopeful, and fatally alarming. One jar claims it will help melt away inches with massage. Another offers slimming aid in slanted script. A third shows an outline of a waist that could slice birthday cake. The creams are heavier than face cream and less polite in scent. Some smell minty, some smell medicinal. One carries the odd sulfur note of a beauty salon perm room on a damp Tuesday. That note is not accidental. Ammonium thioglycolate, known elsewhere for persuading hair to curl or surrender, found its way into some reducing preparations and related beauty schemes with astonishing confidence. The instructions are always lively. Rub briskly, use circular strokes, continue faithfully. Preferably do this while believing in progress and wearing a washable foundation garment. A woman might stand on a bath mat in her slip, smoothing the cream over hips and thighs. The mirror would fog at the edges. The radio in the kitchen might be selling orange juice with equal conviction. The jar often promised stimulating action. Sometimes that meant heat on the skin. Sometimes it meant compounds that sounded peppy even before anyone explained them properly. The line between slimming help and stimulant mischief could be surprisingly fine. There were lotions, creams, tablets, and companion tonics sold with almost no meaningful fence around them. If a label hinted at pep, circulation, or metabolic vigor, the shelf usually smiled and made room. Some formulas chased inches with thyroid-like ideas. Some borrowed from stimulant fashions, then drifting through medicine cabinets. The effect was a bathroom cabinet that occasionally behaved like a beauty parlor sharing a wall with a chemistry set. You could buy such optimism without much trouble. Drugstores stacked the boxes neatly. Department stores wrapped them in tissue. The salesgirl rang them up with the same calm used for face powder and hairpins. No one seemed especially burdened by caution labels because caution labels were not yet the reigning decorators of American packaging. The box preferred confidence. Confidence sold much better beside nail polish. A reducing cream always asked for routine. Morning rubs, evening rubs, more brisk rubbing than any ordinary person would have chosen without printed encouragement. The body was treated like a stubborn silver tray that might yet shine if polished correctly. There is something touching in that faith. A small pastel jar could promise a narrower future by next Thursday. It sat by the tub with its screw lid and expected loyalty. And then, just as you tighten the lid and wipe your fingers on a washcloth, the doorbell rings. It is Tuesday, which means the Avon lady has selected the worst possible moment again. She arrives with her briefcase, her hat pins, and the bright scent of outside air. Her catalogs are stacked like hymnals. Her lipstick has survived the bus ride with admirable discipline. She settles at the kitchen table, though her products are already drifting toward the bathroom in spirit. She opens the case with a snap. Inside lie glass bottles, sample cards, powders, and a fresh promise called Evening Radiance Tonic. The name alone suggests moonlight in a silver dish. The bottle is pale apricot. The label shows a woman gazing upward, as if the ceiling fixture has finally understood her. You ask what is in it, mildly and reasonably. The Avon lady smiles with complete serenity. She says it is marvelous for tired skin, which is not an ingredient and never has been. She flips the catalog pages with a practiced nail. There are words like revive, freshen, and youthful bloom. There is no true explanation. There is only fragrance, hope, and a surprisingly vague relationship with specifics. She has never once read the small print. She never will. Her faith in packaging is almost religious, though less organized and much better scented. The tonic smells of roses first, and alcohol second. Under that comes something brisk and chemical, like a corsage stored near a box of matches. It would look lovely on the vanity beside the thorium whisper and the stern deodorant jars. The Avon lady says the new formula is very scientific. She says customers adore it. Beaumont's illustrated endorsement appears on the back page, which somehow makes the bottle seem both safer and much more mysterious. By now, the bathroom shelf is a tidy pageant of American improvement. A disinfectant poses as intimate care. A complexion cream remembers radioactive glamour. Antiperspirants wage a private campaign against moisture with long aluminum names. Reducing creams wait for vigorous rubbing and better posture. Tonics bloom in apricot glass with no family history at all. The whole cabinet smells of rosewater, aquanet, talc, and quiet chemical ambition. It is all so polished and pleasant on the surface. Chrome shines, towels match, the mirror returns a composed face. Underneath, the products contain enough conflicting theories to run a small debating club. Yet this is the charm of the 1950s bathroom cabinet. It looks perfectly settled. Inside, it is improvising wildly with scent, science, marketing, and a good deal of cheerful nerve. If you stand there long enough, hand resting on the cool enamel sink, the room begins to feel almost companionable in its strangeness. Every bottle is certain. Every jar is optimistic. Very few of them are especially transparent. Harold will later wander in and borrow the wrong pink jar again. Betty will eventually return with another clipping. Next Tuesday, the Avon lady will almost certainly bring a fresh miracle with no clear parentage. For now, you close the cabinet door softly and watch the chrome catch one last stripe of light. The bathroom returns to silence. The faint chemical note remains, patient as ever, underneath the roses. It is pleasant to look back, just once more, at the bathroom in its evening light. The chrome taps have gone from bright silver to a soft, moony gray. The towels are still folded into perfect thirds, as if order itself could be stacked. The vanity shelf is still crowded in that cheerful 1950s way. Pastel jars stand shoulder to shoulder, with spray cans and bottles shaped like little promises. Rosewater still hangs in the air, with aquanet and that faint sharp note underneath. Nothing looks troubled at all. That was one of the nicest little tricks from tonight. The shelf changed slowly, and it kept its manners while doing it. One of the clearest moments was that missing freckle remover. It had once sat there in a neat little bottle, looking as innocent as cough syrup. It promised an even tone and a finer face. It carried mercury with the calm confidence of a woman wearing pearls to sweep the porch. Then, somewhere between the late 1950s and the middle 1960s, it began to slip away. Not with drums. Not with scandal. It simply stopped being such an easy thing to buy from a decent pharmacy shelf. In its place came quieter stand-ins. There were cover creams in flatter jars. There were liquid makeups in shades called shell, petal, and sand. There were bleaching lotions that leaned on peroxide instead. Then came hydroquinone in some of those lightening creams, wrapped in newer language and newer boxes. The mirror still showed the same face leaning close. The shelf still offered help. Only the help had changed its mind about what it wished to be made of. Then there was Betty from next door, who could never resist a miracle in a tube. She arrived in the story exactly as she ought to. She came clutching some new depilatory she had read about with deep faith and very little caution. Betty never let the ingredient list interrupt a good promise. The tube itself looked perfectly modern. It was pale, sleek, and full of smooth certainty. Yet, the kind of hair removers that had once leaned on thallium and other rather bold ideas were starting to lose their place. They did not vanish overnight. The beauty trade was rarely in a hurry when a pretty label was involved. But by the early 1960s, many of those harsher preparations had thinned out on ordinary shelves. In came sulfide creams with friendlier copy. In came pastel razors with matching cases. In came waxes and lotions that made a great show of gentleness, even when they still smelled like a tiny chemistry set under the bathroom lamp. The change was almost comic in its modesty. One decade said, "Here is a cream with a mysterious metal in it." The next decade said, "Perhaps try this lemon-scented alternative instead." The box art improved. The language softened. Betty, of course, remained Betty. She was just as excited by the replacement as she had been by the original. Her enthusiasm never noticed the handoff. That was part of the charm. Another lovely image was that pale pink face cream jar by the sink. Harold kept mistaking it for shaving cream because it looked exactly like shaving cream. He had been doing this for months with the steady confidence of a man who never reads labels smaller than a postage stamp. The funny part was how the jar itself belonged to the larger story. In the 1950s, some face creams still flirted with rather grand claims. They borrowed the language of hormones, glands, extracts, and borrowed youth. They liked to sound half medical and half magical. Then as the years edged forward, many of those louder claims softened into the quieter speech we still know. Out went some of the brisk talk about hormones and special organs in a jar. In came moisturizers. In came lanolin. In came mineral oil, cold cream, collagen talk, vitamin talk, and the whole comfortable family of night creams that sounded less like a lab and more like bedtime. Harold might not have noticed the shift. Harold noticed almost nothing that happened inside a pale pink jar. Still, the jar noticed. Its contents became plainer. Its promises became tidier. It looked the same on the shelf. It lived a somewhat different life under the lid. And then there was the slow, almost sleepy march of the rules themselves. The 1958 Food Additives Amendment sounds like something meant for canned peaches and sandwich bread. It does not sound like something that would wander into a suburban bathroom, yet it did, in its own mild and sideways fashion. The Delaney Clause carried a firmer idea into the air. If something was shown to cause cancer in people or animals, it was not supposed to be waved into food with a cheerful shrug. Cosmetics were not neatly gathered into that same basket. They never really were. The ripple into beauty products was slow. It was uneven. It was full of side doors and half measures and quiet substitutions. Still, the idea drifted outward from the pantry to the powder puff. It changed how companies talked. It changed which ingredients looked worth the trouble. It changed the mood of the whole room, even when it didn't change the wallpaper. Some jars disappeared because the science around them became awkward. Some stayed, but came back with plainer formulas. Some kept their same little smiles on the label, while their insides were trimmed, cleaned up, or swapped out without much fanfare. By the early 1960s, color additives got more direct attention too. That mattered more than it sounds at bedtime. It meant one of the few parts of cosmetics that actually had to pass a front desk before meeting your face was the color itself. Those approved reds and pinks and lakes and dyes began to matter enormously. They still do. A modern lipstick may feel very current in its sleek little tube, yet its color family often owes a quiet debt to decisions made in that window. A blush in a clean white compact may still rest on permissions first shaped when your vanity shelf was chrome and baby blue. The same is true for many steady, useful things that hold a cream together. Emulsifiers, waxes, oils, and preservatives that settled in during those years never entirely left. They learned better manners. They got better labels. They are still with us. That was the odd comfort of the whole chapter. The bathroom from 1965 could look almost exactly like the bathroom from 1955. The same shelf could gleam under the same bulb. Dr. Beaumont's serene mustache could still beam from a jar with absurd confidence. The bottle shapes could remain stubbornly adorable. The towels could still smell faintly of starch. Yet inside the containers, the old bravado had been quietly edited. Not erased, just edited. That matters because the gap never closed all the way. Cosmetics were not turned into medicines. They were not treated like food. They were not asked to stand in a bright line and explain themselves before every sale. The 1950s beauty industry operated on what historians politely call the honor system. That sentence stayed oddly true for a very long time. In some ways, it is still true now. Most cosmetic products still do not need the government to approve them before they appear on a shelf. Color additives are the great exception. The rest of the cabinet still leans heavily on the maker's own judgment, with the law stepping in after the fact more often than before it. The fonts are cleaner now. The ingredient lists are longer. The jars are less likely to mention moon dust, gland extract, or radiant science. But the old regulatory gaps survived the Eisenhower years quite comfortably. It moved through the decades in good shoes, so the final image that lingers is a very gentle one. The cabinet door swings shut on a room that hardly looks changed at all. The labels remain pastel. The glass still shines. The mustached doctor still smiles from his impossible portrait. Yet the jars that quietly disappeared made the whole shelf a little different. A little less reckless, a little more ordinary. And ordinary, in the history of bathrooms, can be a very soothing kind of progress. Now the house has gone still, and the story can settle like powder on the vanity, light and quiet in the dark. The night has that soft weight to it, and the closed cabinet keeps its little secrets without asking anything more from you. Betty from next door has finally taken her latest miracle tomb home again, still certain it will change her life by breakfast. May your dreams be free of thallium depilatory cream, mercury freckle remover, and the quiet glow of radioactive face powder. May the Avon lady never knock on the doors of your dreams, and may Dr. Beaumont's reassuring mustache never appear unbidden in your subconscious. May Harold finally read the label on the face cream jar, and may whatever he discovers there not be too alarming at this hour of the night.